to move you guys up there as well. Alrighty. So, I thought we'll get the Glass Menagerie done and over with as well, because we did the dumbwaiter just a couple of days ago. And I know you guys have your exams coming up pretty soon this week. So, thought we'll finish off both the plays so that you'll be more prepared and have all the materials you'll need, right? Just cross-checking before starting. Everyone can hear me, see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So, the Glass Menagerie, which is classified as a memory play, and it's by Tennessee Williams, as you guys know. And very, very, very starkly different in style, depiction of subject matter, and the entire theatrics of this play are extremely opposite to the dumbwaiter, the play that we last did. Okay, so let's see this time what sort of elements and what sort of differences there are going to be in the Glass Menagerie. Okay, so to do a bit of a recap, now 20th century modern drama is where we're at. And remember, last time we looked at modern drama in Europe, because we were looking at a British playwright who was Harold Pinter. And we were sort of discussing how modern drama flourished and how it developed through the ages. This time we're going to be looking at modern drama in North America, because Tennessee Williams was a US playwright. So this was an American playwright that we're going to be discussing this time. And we are moving from Europe and Britain towards North America, towards the American, Canadian, Mexican, like that. That's like the North America, South America, that American hemisphere of the globe, right? So Tennessee Williams, as you can see, was born a bit earlier to Harold Pinter. So he was born in 1911, and he was an American playwright and screenwriter, whereas Harold Pinter was late. I can't remember, I think it was 1930s or something where he was born. So there's like a 25 year age gap between the two. So Tennessee Williams preceded Harold Pinter in terms of his writing and beginning to be a dramatist, right? So in America, he's considered among the three foremost playwrights of the 20th century. So three of the big ones, like the really important, non-negotiably that you have to know if you're doing like American drama. So Tennessee Williams is one of them. And two others are Eugene O'Neill and Arthur Miller. I think I was mentioning about Arthur Miller last time in the presentation as well. Arthur Miller, if one of the little facts that you guys might or might not know, was the husband of Marilyn Monroe. He was a playwright and he was a critic, and he was like one of the really important figures of the 20th century American sort of like literary field. He wrote The Crucible and Death of a Salesman, which we briefly mentioned last time. So Tennessee Williams has won 2 Pulitzer Prizes in drama. So one of his most famous plays is A Streetcar Named Desire, and Glass Menagerie is also huge. Other ones are like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and he's done like many other plays as well, but these ones are the big names, right? So as we were talking last time, when it comes to theater, when we're coming to drama, to the genre of drama, we always think of how do the words work off of the page and on the actual stage. So I hope that you guys, even if you didn't get to watch the entire thing, I hope you got to watch at least a part of the link that I shared, the production of the Glass Menagerie. I wanted you to watch it, if possible, before the class to get an idea of just how different the styles are, right? Compared to the dumbwaiter that we were doing, and then like the Glass Menagerie, they're like vastly different, like almost like heaven and earth kind of like differences in style, right? So let's do a quick recap just to brush up your like memory all over again, right? So we were talking about modern drama and how it moved through the ages towards the 19th and 20th century. We were talking about Henrik Ibsen, who was the father of realism or naturalism, which moved away from Victorian melodramatic styles into a very naturalistic, more like slice of life realism on stage, right? 20th century, we discussed, was a lot of schools and a lot of styles. So there were many schools and many styles. As you can see last time, last time we discussed the theater of the absurd, and we were looking at comedy of menace, which was like Pinter's style, right? And then I was mentioning that Tennessee Williams' style would be more realistic. It's not going to fall as social realism, but Williams' style is going to be more of what we call psychological realism, right? So in the Glass Menagerie, you can see a lot of these three elements or styles that I have mentioned. There's the expressionist style, the psychological realism, and there's also going to be, we were talking last time briefly about this angry young man archetype. So angry young man was a movement that started in Britain. It originated in Britain, again post-war, during like the depression and economic crises of the time in 1950s, I think, where there was this stereotype of angry young men in place who were these mostly working class kind of men, who were young men who were stuck in their life situations. They can't escape. They're working very mediocre, menial, repetitive jobs that they're really frustrated about, and their family situations are kind of like stifling them and choking them in, and they're angry about the state of the world. They're angry about like their own state of like life, the situation that they're stuck in. So this is like an angry young man archetype, right? And you will see this a bit in, not a bit, but to a considerable extent in Tom Wingfield's character as well, right? So remember, these are three of the kind of like stylistic ways that we'll be looking at the Glass Menagerie. So we were mentioning how in the 20th century there were multiple schools and styles of theater, and they often tended to have these existential themes. And last time we were looking at how in very modernist style, like sort of 20th century absurdist, that style of theater, it was very slapstick, and it had physical comedy, and it was a mix of tragedy and absurdity. So let's look at whether we can find some of these existential themes in the Glass Menagerie as well, right? So Tennessee Williams, he was a follower of realism. He was follower of the realist movement rather than the absurdist or like some sort of other epic theater or avant-garde or like other theater schools. He was a realist, but how he differed was that his realism was less to do with naturalism or social realism, which is essentially showing life as it is, like putting it out on stage and showing everyday characters living everyday lives and doing things that is very natural and very like, it's basically like a slice of life, right? So Tennessee Williams did not believe in strict naturalism. He didn't like this concept of strict naturalism or social realism. He wanted to push it a bit more into this genre, like school or style, that we will call psychological realism. Okay, and let's see how he did that. So Tennessee Williams' style. So similar to poetry, similar to any genre of literature I've told you, like different in theater as well, there are different eras, different playwrights, and there are different movements and styles. So you can sometimes group them together saying, oh, during this certain age or a certain time period in literature, these sort of movements are happening. But there can also be there can be similarities and differences in how each artist handles his subject matter, right? So Harold Pinter, we saw, was very absurdist. He had Pinterest style, which was a sort of mix of very sparse, bare props, a very bare setting, like very empty with minimal props and minimal objects being used, repetitive, short, nonsensical dialogues, and sometimes humorous, sometimes tragic elements. Tennessee Williams, although also modernist, he uses this different style of psychological, also sometimes known as poetic realism. Okay, so in order to achieve this psychological realism that he wanted to portray on stage, he came up with a technique called plastic theater. Okay, so plastic theater is something that Tennessee Williams came up himself. So you will understand it better as we go along, like go through the remaining slides and go through the presentation. But plastic theater is essentially realism portrayed in a psychological lens, sort of like made it more fluid and more exaggerated and kind of more dramatic, using an expressionist style. Okay, so the style of expressionism in art, which was very focused and very interested in looking at the human psyche, what happens inside people's minds, and not only looking at the psyche, but depicting it in a sort of very theatrical and exaggerated way, not very cut and dry. It's not a very clinical approach. It's a more very artistic, fluid, like a kind of very creatively enhanced kind of a look at psyche, right? So Williams's style is going to look at psychology over philosophy. Whereas remember last time in the dumbwaiter Pinter, everything was about philosophy. It wasn't really about, we were talking about how it wasn't about providing answers. It wasn't about showing real life as it is. It's more about giving you a complex philosophy to get you thinking. Okay, Williams is going to be about psychology and the inner psyche of characters' minds rather than really thinking about absurd ideas or complex philosophical questions on existence. Okay, so here are some, like this is Tennessee Williams to begin with, and here are some, like this is the style of his theater. As you can see, very different from what we saw in the dumbwaiter, right? Okay, so Tennessee Williams, his plays in general, like we were discussing, tend to explore unconscious motivations, traumas, and sort of like the hidden neuroses of characters. Okay, why are people motivated to act in the way that they do? Like, what's really going on in their minds, kind of. So, psychological realism as a style portrays reality as it exists inside the mind. So, inside the mind of the narrator, inside the mind of the characters, it sort of shows reality within the mind. So, you're very conscious that this is reality happening inside somebody's mind. Okay. So inner psyche's urges and unconscious mental drives of characters are examined through a very intimate lens. It kind of takes you right in. It's very intimate, right? So plastic theater, like we were saying, Williams is very unique in this. He developed this kind of style where he infuses realism with expressionist devices in order to represent the psyche, because to show the mind is also kind of a tricky subject matter, right? Like, how do you show the inside of somebody's mind? So he came up with this pretty cool technique. So in order to do this, he uses expressionist devices like distorted lighting. He uses the light and shadow effects. He really makes use of lighting and shadows. He uses music. He uses symbols, and in order to depict sort of like very fluid mental states than objective reality. So look how absolutely contrasting these two plays are. Right? Did you see any of this in Pinter's dumbwaiter? Imagine Pinter's dumbwaiter set to music. Like that would be quite interesting to see, actually. Imagine it's set to, like, I don't know, like a new hip hop music, like a song or something. Like, there is zero song, there's zero music in Pinter, because it wants you to look at the emptiness, the bleakness, and like life without all these little fringes and animations and all of these little other aspects to it, right? So the plays of Tennessee Williams do discuss social realism. So they do look at realism in society, like social themes and issues that are happening. And he's very focused on this idea of like social pressures and frustrations of mid 20th century American society, because during the Great Depression, because that was the time where he lived in, that was his social context, the Great Depression and these ideas of the American dream, and then youth and families who are stuck in this concept, but they can't really achieve the things they want because life isn't working out. So he has a lot of these ideas of frustrations of the working middle class, and he examines desire, sexuality, violence, frustrations. All these are popular, like, social themes that Williams likes to talk about. But like we said, he intentionally rejects photographic realism in favor of this expressionistic style that he uses. He doesn't like straight realistic plays. He wants to use a different style. So let's see how he gets about doing that. Okay, so this is Williams's style. When we're looking at Tennessee Williams, these are the things that he tends to do He uses expressionist devices such as lighting, music, and an external narrator who we can see narrating events based on his subjective memory. So it's not an objective reality where these things happened. It's a more subject, it's subjective. You know that this person is talking to you about something that happened to them. So obviously it's going to be biased. It's going to have feelings and emotions involved. It's not just a cut and dry version of reality, right? So when you're looking at this style of the memory play, it's really important that you really pay strong attention to production notes. Okay, what is the playwright telling you to do? Like in a play like this, stage directions are extremely important. Listen to what the playwright is actually saying. So not just the script, not just the dialogues of what the characters are speaking, but the production notes of how the playwright wants his play to be produced. Okay, so also pay attention to lighting. Okay, pay attention to music and sound. Where has he given you indications that at this point music is playing, at this point the lighting changes, at this point the music stops, or the lighting turns a different color? Because these are all cues. They are all very important cues, and sort of like he's giving you clues. None of those are just like things that he has just added there because it felt pretty and he was trying to decide how can I make this like the prettiest play in the production. No, he's giving you very direct internal cues. Okay, also look at props. Props are going to be like what objects are put there, what are the like symbols of the objects in the setting. Okay, so again, very different to Pinterest style, right? So rather than photographic naturalism, he really made use of all these physical elements of the stage. Now, what are the physical elements of a stage? The space like we were talking about, like the space where the play is going to be acted out. And then the lighting, the sort of auditory sounds and visuals that auditory sounds and sort of noises or effects that you could use, the props where things are used where. So these things are really important in a Williams play. Okay, with Pinter, he's just like, there'll be two beds and like three walls. That's it. Like there's no more description of the setting so much in Harold Pinter's plays, right? So pay attention to these expressionistic lighting, symbolic props, and any musical motifs, like what sort of music is playing in the background, right? Because all of these are going to combine together to project a character's inner mental state onto the audience. So these are all devices, very powerful devices in Tennessee Williams plays, where his character's mental states are conveyed to you using the stage, using the setting and the stage. Okay, so most of Tennessee Williams plays, and particularly the Glass Menagerie, has its origins in memory. This is about somebody remembering something that happened to him. Now the interesting thing about that is when you are the audience and when you are watching this play, remember, you're supposed to be inside the character's mind. Okay, you're not somebody who is watching. There's no like distance where, oh, I'm just like sitting here watching what happens to two hitmen who are in a room and they're just like talking about this and talking about that and reading the newspaper. It's not like that. The Williams' style is you're supposed to be sucked in. You're inside the character's mind. So that's how he portrays his plastic realism, his plastic theater, right? Okay, so speaking about lighting, remember that, so this is going to be a theater of the mind, and this is going to be a theater which pulls you into the narrator or the character's mind. So pay attention to lighting. So I took some snippets from a production that was actually done, and I want you guys to read how they have described the lighting of this production, right? Let's see who is here today. There's Mithili Setuki. There's Dulana. Okay. Shall we have Setuki start? Setuki, read out from the design of this memory play, like read out that paragraph for me.
The design of this memory play, sparsely but specifically furnished platforms hovering over a pool of inky black water, suggested the ebb and flow of memories and events going in and out of focus, as such things are wont to do. Credit for the superior physicality of the setting goes to Bob Crowley, but the ethereal quality of the complete visual experience goes to the lighting designer Natasha Katz. Her work on this production is one of my favorite designs of the past decade.
Okay, thanks. So, as you can see, they're talking about like how now in this particular play they've used an extremely cool device. I actually don't know how they achieved it, but they've done something here to achieve a sort of mirror effect. So everything that happens on the stage is mirrored below. I don't know if they've set like a mirror on the like underneath it or what they've done, but it's really cool because all the lighting, all of this, and it's sort of like the article was saying, it hovers over a pool of inky black water that kind of suggests how memories and events are flowing inside the mind, right? So this is again, you're directly inside the character's mind. So Kinuri, can you read the second paragraph from here?
There are two main color palettes at work here, an icy coolness of blues and whites and a cozy warmth of ambers and reds. There is also an amazing byproduct of the lighting. It allows for some astonishing reflections. Separately, the whites and blues create a stark, piercing environment to pinpoint the narrator who exists in the now. Similarly, the embers and reds wash over scenes that are memories. And of course, these pools of light provide practical beams that tell us that it is day or night time.
Okay, so now look how beautifully this is to show you how lighting is used in productions like this, right? So this shows you how different colors. Now, I want you to go back and actually read the script of Tennessee Williams's play, because I remember in certain states, like places he has mentioned, there's going to be this color, there's going to be this sort of a light, this spotlight is going to fall on this person. So there is, remember we were talking last time about how theater has more control rather than just reading like a novel or a poem or something. A theatric experience can be controlled by the director. So here, rather than more than in Pinter's plays, you can see very direct artistic control, because Tennessee Williams is telling you, this is how I envision it and this is how I want this sort of like manipulated, right? So in this version of the play, look at how they've used the lighting. They use a mix of blues and whites and a cozy warmth of amber and reds. So when the narrator is speaking, when the narrator in the now, when he is in the present moment, Tom is speaking, there's a white light that like pinpoints him and creates like a stark environment. Then when he's talking about his memories, apparently it mixes into ambers and reds and kind of like a yellowish reddish warm light. So that's how light is manipulated. Now let's see over here. Can someone else read for me? I'm not sure who Dulana is. Can you read for us this third paragraph?
Okay, miss.
Okay, sure.
It is
Dulana.
when
Sorry, Dulana. Yeah, go ahead.
it is when both are used together that cuts really heightens the moods of William's play. When there is particular familiar tension, the harsh white lights nearly overcomes the warmth of the memory. When there are murkier memories, such as when Tom, our narrator, wasn't directly involved, a warm light seems closely envelop the other characters, while a warm blue shade takes up the rest of the darkness. It is both striking and lovely.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Dulana. So now can you see how how the lighting changes? These are the sort of like effects that I want you guys to get into your head. So apparently when there's family tension, when mother and Tom are fighting, or when there's like tense moments in the family, the harsh white light nearly overcomes the warmth of the memory. So that reddish warm light is overcome with like a harsh bright light. Okay. And when there are murkier memories, again this warm light seems to envelop other characters. Now, this is the setting I was telling you. Can you see like the inky black water effect? I find that so amazing. I don't know how they have managed to do that. But imagine watching this play like this. It doesn't look like it actually doesn't look like a very realist play, right? And it definitely doesn't look absurdist. It's a very fluid, sort of like almost like a magical kind of effect that you have, right? So just for you guys to think about those. Okay, so the way I like to think about this is I like to think of memory plays or Tennessee Williams' style of this plastic theater and this sort of like photographic realism that he uses. I like to think of it as Dumbledore's Pensieve. So think about this play as you being sucked into Dumbledore's Pensieve. For all you Harry Potter fans and anyone who's watched it and still like the Harry Potter series, you would remember like the Pensieve moment, right? So a Pensieve is where Dumbledore takes out his memories and thoughts and puts them in here to store them. So us looking into this play is something like Harry peering into that Pensieve and getting sucked in. Okay, so the best way to understand a Tennessee Williams play is to understand it through that angle where you're peering into somebody's memories and you're getting pulled into it. And that is exactly what Tennessee Williams wants from you, because that's the effect he's trying to create, right? So let's watch like a small, where is that? Let's watch a small clip of it just to remind you guys what that's going to look like. Okay, it's not popping up for me. Oh, it's playing separately. Okay, let's watch it over here. You can see the screen, right?
You need some confusion in receiving your letter, Mr. Dumbledore. In all the years Tom's been here, he's never once had a family visitor. Been incidents with the other children. Nasty things. Tom, you have a visitor.
How'd you do, Tom?
Okay, I hope you were able to see that. I just wanted you to get an idea of that, the effect of what it's like to be inside that pensive kind of a memory thing, right? So look how even over there in that short clip, you could see everything's blurry. Everything's like dimly lit. There's like this play of light and shadow. So this is the effect that Tennessee Williams is trying to create in his memory plays with us, okay? So just try to look at it in that angle and you'll find it pretty fun. Okay, but here are some questions that I want you to think about. Is memory always reliable? Now, if you know that you are watching a memory play and you are watching someone else's memory that they are narrating to us, think about, are memories always reliable? Are they always truth? Okay. Then also think about the fact whether one character's narration, can it ever give us the full perspective of an event? Okay. If one person is telling us this is how these events happened and this happened to me, like my mother was doing this and then this, does it ever give the full perspective of an event? Then that gets you thinking, then whose versions are not given to us? Okay, if we're only getting one version of somebody's event of somebody's perspective of what happened, whose versions are not given? Whose voices? Now in the play, think about I think we spoke about this maybe in Achuby's short story and maybe in Evelyn, right? Evelyn. Voices. Whose voices are loud? Who is the loudest in the play? Who is the quietest? Who is mute? But even if you're loud, are you really heard? Even if you're soft-spoken and if you don't have a voice, is your voice being told? Like, is your version of events being told to us? So just something to think about, right? Okay. Which brings us to the character of Tom Wingfield. Okay, now Tom Wingfield plays a very interesting dual, multiple kind of roles in this entire play because he posits himself as he's a narrator. He's also a character in the play. He also directs the play because he tells you where there will be lighting, or like this is how the music is going to be, like the music is going to play here and there's going to be like lighting because in memory lighting is all like blurry. So he's talking about his own memories as if he's sort of directing the memories inside his mind, right? He also is a bit of a magician, an illusionist. He talks to you, he tells you that he's going to give you truth in the disguise of illusion, and he says that he is the opposite of a stage magician, but what he's doing is he is being a bit of a magician with us, right? He's creating a world which he's sucking us into, which we're not really sure whether it's a truth or an illusion or somewhere in between, right? So he's doing all of these things at once. So he's a pretty very interestingly placed character. So you've seen in those very important opening monologues and like the subsequent monologues where Tom sort of comes and interjects himself into the narrative and then starts talking to you directly as the audience. So when he's opening the play, he says, yeah, I have tricks in my pocket. I do have things up my sleeve. I'm going to give you truth in the pleasant disguise of illusion. Okay, so he is already telling you, I am giving you an illusion. This is not really the truth. Like this is the truth, but it's disguised as an illusion. But again, which brings us back to the questions of this is Tom's truth. Okay, this is Tom who is telling his truth. Do you know if this is Amanda's truth? Do you know if his version is Laura's truth? Like they could have completely like different or varying memories or narratives about what happened, right? So Tom is playing a bit of a trick with us. Okay, so he also says that the play is memory, and then he goes on to describe what a memory play is. So see what I told you about him kind of being like the director too. So he's going to tell you, so since this is a memory play, it's going to be dimly lighted, it's going to be sentimental, it's not realistic. So he is explaining the genre of the play to you. He's explaining his intentions and his artistic style. So he's literally giving you a kind of like an insight into his creative process too, right? As an artist, like what he plans to do. And then he even talks about like how in memory everything seems to happen to music. Okay, he says when you're thinking about something in memory, I don't know, does this happen with you guys? I don't think I think of my life with music, with a soundtrack to it. Like that's kind of weird, but I don't know, maybe it happens with you. But he says that in memory everything happens to a music or like a soundtrack is happening, and then he goes on to direct you and show you. That explains the fiddle in the wings. So in the wings of the stage, someone is playing a fiddle. A fiddle is a musical instrument, right? So he's constantly giving you this commentary. This is the scene, this is what you're seeing, but here are also the tricks that I'm using to convince you. I'm using lighting, I'm using a fiddle, I'm using music, and I'm using this sentimental style. So you as the watcher need to be aware that this is an illusion, okay? So he keeps repeating, the scene is memory and is therefore non-realistic. Then he places himself in it and says that I'm a narrator, but I'm also a character. And then he goes on to explain the other characters who are going to be in on the scene. Now, this is an interesting take on traditional theater, because in Greek and Roman theater and in I think even in medieval theater and sometimes in Shakespeare, in the older versions of theater, there was always usually a narrator. And you might have seen this in our Sri Lankan dramas as well, right? There's usually a narrator who comes on and he tells you, oh, this is where it's set and this is what's going to happen. And these are the characters. So there's a narrator. Now, in this play, Tom is both the narrator and the character. So it makes it a unique, like a kind of a new device, right? That is kind of something that Williams himself like has created and used very artistically. Okay, so Tom Wingfield has this tendency to talk a lot in monologues. Like when he's relating the past to you, to us, the watchers, he speaks in monologues and he gives this sort of philosophical commentary. So even though we said that this is not a philosophy play like Absurdist theatre or whatever, there is a philosophical, because he's musing. These are called philosophical musings. He's thinking about the nature of reality. He's thinking about the nature of memory, of nostalgia. He's making comments on theatre itself, right? Theatre as an illusion. What is this? So that you can hear the playwright's voice injected into Tom Wingfield. And this is interesting for you to think about and also remember, because as opposed to something like a Pinterest play, especially the Glass Menagerie is known for being autobiographical to a very large extent. So it's largely based on Tennessee Williams's life and actual memories and incidents that happened to him. So think about how that impacts Tom's character and what he's doing when he's sort of like telling you all this like tales and giving you sort of insight into how his mind is working, right? Yeah, and during Pinter's class, somebody had asked, I think it was Setuki or Tisuri, one of the two of you, had asked about the fourth wall and whether in the Glass Menagerie there is Tom as a character, he's breaking the fourth wall. And the answer is yes. Obviously, he's breaking the fourth wall because he directly addresses you as the audience. So you are no longer watching theater or like watching the play as a removed and detached person, like you're just watching a film or like you're eating some popcorn and watching something. Here there is a character who's directly looking at you and he's making you aware that you're watching a play and he's conversing with you. Okay, so this is a strong theatric device, this idea of breaking the fourth wall, because here Tom, he acts both as narrator of his own story and he acts as a participant in the events, and he regularly steps forward. So he steps forward and directly interacts with the audience, and he will tell you, he will explain to you that this is a memory, and he will guide you through the scene. So he's breaking the fourth wall there. So it's an important device that Williams is employing here. Okay. So now it comes to the idea of setting. Now, last time as well in the Dumbwaiter, in Pinter's play, we were talking about the importance of setting and how setting can influence style and how the setup of a stage is really, really important in getting its themes across, right? So here in the opening scene, in stage directions itself, go back to the play and read it, you will find that in the stage directions, he says that the scene is memory and it's therefore non-realistic. Memory takes a lot of poetic license. Okay, so now he's talking, he's actually letting you know about the unreliability of memory to begin with. Okay, so he says that memory takes a lot of poetic. What is poetic license? Poetic license is the right given to a writer or like an author or an artist to bend reality, that you're not expected as a writer to tell reality exactly as it is unless you're a non-fiction writer who's writing biography or autobiography. All other creative writers have this poetic license, which is a license to bend, twist, and kind of do things with reality, right? So he is talking about this unreliability here. He says memory tends to omit some details. Memory tends to exaggerate other details according to the emotional value. So he's sort of giving you like a treatise. He's giving you a proper lecture on how memory is influenced by emotion. So your memories are not really objective. Like if at a particular moment in your life, something that happened had a lot of anger in it. Like if you were angry at that point, you will forever remember that emotion as a very charged. Like you will remember other people's faces as like twisted and like this reddish hue everywhere. So emotion colors our memory. So this is in stage directions. Isn't that so interesting? Right? So this is Williams telling you directly how he is setting up the stage for you. So in contrast to the Dumbwaiter, setting here is almost a character. it's so powerful that it becomes almost a character, because there's so much going on. Like the props are elaborately placed. There's this couch, this dining table, these symbols of the glass figurines. Like imagine all these tiny little glass figurines set up, and then there's this fire escape and the smoke and lighting. So it's very like, pay attention to this is one particular play where you really strongly have to read the playwright's stage directions. So pay attention to how the setting is set up, because altogether this is going to, just give me 1 second, I saw something in the chat. Is Styles also doing the same by addressing the audiences? I actually don't know. Is this another play that you're doing, Dulana? I don't know. Who is Styles?
Yes, me.
It's
He is
another
the
play.
narrator.
Okay.
Yes.
What is that play?
History Bansi.
Right. And by who?
Arthur Fugard or someone like.
Okay, Few Gods. Okay, I'll take a look at that. I actually don't know. That's not a play that I've read or looked into in a while, but I'll take a look at that. So, yeah, go back and see whether that is also happening in this other play as well, because it's not something I've read, so I can't comment, but it's a good idea and a good like sort of note for you to go and actually search and see whether that is also happening, right? So, like we were saying, there's a commentary on the nature of memory, the unreliability of memory or human psyche, and there's this idea of memory or narrative being able to be warped by time and emotion, right? And this fluidity, it's not like a very set in stone kind of a thing, that it can be warped or changed or twisted by time and emotion, right? So in order to convey all this, the playwright uses this stream of thought, like flashbacks. These are some of the devices he employs for Tom. Now you can see he's all up there, like all dramatic, like on a fire escape with smoke around him. It's a very cool play to act out to. It's very theatrical. Like this is theater in its most theatrical form. As opposed to Pinter's, which is very sparse and bleak and dry setting. So I put a picture of this just to give you guys an idea of the contrast. So this is also a production of the Glass Menagerie, but they have tried to do it in the opposite style, like in a different style to what Tennessee Williams had directed, right? Look at this setting. It's almost like a setting from the Dumbwaiter, right? Like it's completely bleak, like these gray bland walls. This all almost looks like a hospital bed, like a very rickety metal bed here. One table, one little, I don't even know what that is, like a little couch or a chair or something. And can you see the difference in the styles? So if you look at these two, this is more of a Williams play as Williams wanted, whereas this is more of a modern take on a Williams play, like a more 20th century modernist, maybe a little bit absurdist kind of a take. So I just wanted you to look at the two differences and see it. There's necessarily no right or wrong. It's not to say that you can't do the play like this. What's important is for you to think about what difference does it make. Okay, for example, if Tennessee Williams intended this as a memory play, and if he wants it to be hazy and blurry and covered in memory, would you personally feel that a setup like this feels more like a memory? Or would a memory feel more like this, black and white and very minimal and cut and dry and with minimal distractions and like little ornaments and things in it? Is it just going to be a black and white kind of a memory? So it's just different styles of portraying on stage, right? As opposed to, as opposed to, again, the normal setting, how most people choose to interpret Williams' plays like this, with this dramatic lighting, with this very hazy, soft, blurry kind of a technique, right? Okay, which brings us to production notes. Now, I want to ask you guys, how many of you are here today? Okay, I want to ask you guys, when you were studying the play at school or in your classes, does your version of the play come with production notes in it?
We have them.
You have them? Okay, all of you?
We have the production notes.
Okay, perfect. So if you have them, I'm just gonna run through them. I was going to tell you, if you didn't have them, make sure you get a version with the production notes. But if you do have them, I just want to, very, very, very important, I would say almost in almost equal measure, the production notes are as important to this play as the script itself. So make sure you read through this very carefully and very paying a lot of attention. So let me just read out a little bit. So in studying a play, we habitually isolate such constituents, elements of drama, as plot, character, setting, and theme. When you're studying it, you tend to isolate these things. But when you're attending or watching a play, we become involved. We have no choice. We become involved and we're like sort of pulled into the production. So Williams's production notes are going to emphasize for you not the elements of a play, but it's going to describe you to the unfolding performance in a theater. So how it's meant to be played out in a theater, right? And his plentiful stage directions. Now look at that. Like, he has included so much stage directions in that play for you, which is a clear sign that he has a vision. That's the playwright's vision of how he wants the play to be acted out. Pinter doesn't have so many stage directions, right? It's pretty bare, minimal, sparse directions, and he leaves it up to you to interpret it. But very different to Williams's style. So it's a reminder that what Aristotle called a spectacle does not need to be regarded as only theatrical effects added. It's not just about adding multiple theatrical effects to make it as like sort of flamboyant and flashy as possible. It's about encompassing and acting all those, like using those elements to progress action upon the stage. Okay, so you see that in this memory play, Williams borrows from the medium of cinema, specifically from silent film, to present the interrupted continuity of Tom Wingfield's stream of thought which bears his story. So there's going to be this character who is narrating his stream of thought and like sort of letting you inside his mind, but it's also interrupted by memory, by flashbacks, by things that happened. It's like a back and forth, right? So he's successfully author, narrator, director, and actor, all unreals as on the screen of his memory. So it's almost like watching a film, but a film with the director's cut in it, right? A film where the director comes in from time to time saying, oh, this is my commentary on that part of the film. This is why I sort of like filmed it in that way. I use this angle in order to give you this sort of idea. So the film director is stepping in to give you a commentary, right? So yeah, this is the most important. The theater in which the Glass Menagerie is performed becomes the theater of the mind. Okay, so it's a theater of the mind that's happening. So I'm not going to go through all of the production notes with you guys, but read through this, and absolutely important, if possible, commit it, not all of it, but commit whatever important parts to memory. Use Tennessee Williams's production notes to go back to the play and analyze the script. Okay, because he's being actually very cooperative with you guys, instead of alienating you as an audience and being like, like putting himself on a high stage and being like, I am the director and the I am the one who is doing all of this. He's letting you inside his artistic process. And he's telling you, this is how I'm doing it. And this is how I want you guys to sort of understand the play. So he's kind of like being really cool about it. So yeah, watch these, read the production notes, read the script again, and then go back to watch the actual production of the play, maybe using the link that I sent you guys, which was pretty Pretty good. I found that rendition pretty cool. Apart from the fact that there were some comments that they were not following the exact script. So like I said, don't go to learn the script through that rendition, but watch the characters. And Amanda's character is really good, right? What did you guys think of Amanda Wingfield in the YouTube like rendition that I showed you guys?
Oh, yes, I did watch it.
What did you feel about Amanda Wingfield, the character portrayal?
I felt like she was dreamy.
Okay, dreamy, as in, what do you mean by dreamy? Sort of like living in a dream world, kind of?
Well, yes, and more than that, it's like her actions and what she's supposed to do are a little bit, how do I say that? Contrasting from what she's supposed to do, like what she's doing and what she's supposed to do are very different.
Okay, I will come back to that when we're discussing Amanda's character. So I'm glad that you guys were able to watch the film and watch the YouTube link. And also, what I kind of really liked about that production was I thought Amanda's character was portrayed really well as this sort of strong, domineering force that is like nagging and annoying, but like quite a powerful presence on stage. Tom was also relatively well portrayed, I felt. But also something else was you would have noticed the very strong southern accent, right? So last time we were looking at Pinter's play and it's a very British, like all the actors were talking in very proper British accents the way it was meant to be. And this you might have found it a little difficult to follow the accents because it's very southern. That's very south. Let's go back and look at it afterwards as well. And we looked at the production notes. And now we come to that idea that I always tell you about, that we spoke about in Pinter's as well. How does style impact or contribute to setting? And that impacts and contributes to theme. Because all these are interlinked, they're interrelated, they're like cogs in the same machine. Style is incorporated in and impacts setting, and then that impacts the overall theme, right? So Williams's artistic philosophy in the Glass Menagerie and in general is that he breaks away from commercial realism or like naturalism, and he wants to opt for dreamlike lighting and music and this expressionist style of theater, right? And his style of theater is a drama that is in the Glass Menagerie. It's a drama that's told entirely through the subjective, emotionally charged lens of its narrator. Okay? So in order to achieve this style, how does he set up the setting? So like I said, read the stage directions, watch the film or like renditions to note how these things change. So there'll be a dim and sort of poetic, like a fluid atmosphere. The stage will use hazy lighting, recurring musical motifs, and there's this idea of mirroring. So everything that happens on the stage is going to be a mirror of the psyche. Whatever happens in Tom's brain, this is what we're led to believe, whatever's happening in Tom's psyche it changes the things on stage. So it's almost like there is a have you guys watched Inside Out? Like if you watch the cartoon Inside Out, where there are all these like tiny little emotions who are like having controls in like a young girl's brain. So these emotions, so remember, if you have watched it, if anger like presses the button, everything becomes red, and if sadness takes over, she becomes like really weepy, and like the setting changes to blue and the lights like everything. So it's kind of like that. So you almost feel that Tom's mind and his inner emotions are changing reality for us as the audience, because what we are watching changes depending on Tom as the narrator, right? So there's a dream-like narration. It's very mirrory. It has a mirror effect, and there's a dreamlike narration by a single character, whereas everyone else is in his memory. We are also inside his memory. We've also gotten sucked into his memory, right? So what are the themes that is brought about through a setting like this? It brings out this idea of the heart or the psyche, like the inner psyche's distortions. This idea of distortion. What we remember is often deeply altered by things like guilt, nostalgia, longing, regret, like all these emotions change and alter the way that we perceive reality or even remember memories, right? So memory is definitely influenced by emotion. And then there's this idea of the subjective over the objective. So how is that theme brought about? It's brought by the idea that truth on the stage is not a literal historical record. It's not someone literally telling you that in history at these points these things happened in my life. That's not what's happening. It's an emotional reality. Okay, so bringing us to the character of Laura Wingfield. Okay, so Laura Wingfield is to me is a very interesting character here, because I know for the most part of the play she comes across as pretty flat. You don't see any character development in her. She is like the same flat character that she was at the beginning till the end. She doesn't have a voice. She often other people speak on behalf of her. Tom tells us what Laura feels. Her mother interprets what Laura must be feeling. Mother interprets or decides what Laura needs. What does she need in life? What would bring her happiness? What needs to be done in order for her to get happiness? All of these things are kind of decided for her by her mother, because she doesn't have a voice of her own. And similarly, Tom is no better, right? He doesn't really try to get to know his sister and try to understand her as a person and give voice to her. He also tends to look at her kind of like an object. Like, so in Tom's perspective, don't you feel that he kind of looks like at Laura like a glass figure in himself? The way he looks at her is like this, this delicate, gentle, like sort of disabled, soft and shy, timid girl who can't look after herself, and therefore he is filled with regret for the fact that he should have done something for her, but he kind of escaped. So Tom himself looks at Laura, and like Tom the mother, like almost everyone looks at her as if she is a glass figurine in this cabinet herself, right? So she's portrayed as very delicate, unvoiced, very shy, doesn't speak, but often she comes across as the most interesting character, because Laura comes as a symbolic figure. She's almost like this. She's this ethereal glass figurine in the middle of like a whole bunch of human characters that are moving around. Laura is very static. She's almost like and I'm not saying this particularly in a good way. Like, I'm not saying she's like an ethereal, like a glorious angel kind of a figure, but there's something very preserved and pristine about Laura, and which makes her come across as a symbol rather than a real, like a human live character, right? So what's this in the chat? Do you think Jim understood her better than the others? That's an interesting point, Kinuri. I think actually Jim came the closest to seeing Laura as a human figure. Mother and brother have both, they sort of see Laura as a glass figurine inside a case already. Okay? Which is interesting, because then Jim comes in, and Jim is not necessarily a likable character, or I don't think he's either likable or unlikable, but he doesn't really act in the most noble of ways and all of that. He has these complications. But Jim is the first person who comes into her life and looks at this figurine in a glass figure, and he kind of sees it as more than a glass figurine, right? So he looks at her and he's like, there's something special about you. And it could be portrayed in any lens, that Jim could have been just a manipulative person trying to take advantage of like a disadvantaged girl, right? But there's a definite sense that he did get closer to understanding her better than her own family, or like at least getting a glimpse into her inner world. Do we see her mother or her brother actually sitting down with her and showing interest in those animals? That's an interesting thing to think about. Do we ever at any point see them sitting with her and saying, oh, like, explain to us why you're so fascinated with these animals? Like, tell us about the unicorn, right? Tell us about the horse. Like, what do you like about them? Whereas Jim actually manages to do that. He comes and he is the first person to whom Laura starts describing why her favorite is the unicorn. And she tells him, these are my animals and this is why I like the unicorn. The unicorn is different. So that is one little moment where you get an actual glimpse into some sort of depth in Laura's character. That she has a thinking mind of her own, that she has wishes or desires, or that she is not just a little object kept in the house, right? So Laura as a person is portrayed to us. Now, again, remember what I told you? Whose perspective is this? This is not Laura's perspective. We are seeing Laura through Jim's lens. Sorry, not Jim's, Tom's lens. So the brother's lens controls everything that we see. So we don't even know if this is actually who Laura was, because we only see what Tom wants us to see. Okay, so he portrays her as cloistered, and she's afraid of contact with the world outside. So either because she's genuinely such a shy and stunted and scared character, or I personally feel that it's her family that has made her this way, because they make her scared to go outside, because they're like, oh, like you're, I don't know, like they treat her as this very fragile person who can't get anything done herself, right? And in that sense, it's interesting, like it has a sort of complicated element to it if you think about her mother, who doesn't even like to accept the fact that Laura is crippled, right? Remember when she tries to say, mother, I'm crippled, the mom flies into like a tantrum and she's like, don't say that word, like I don't even want you to say that word in front of me. So there's sort of like a denial of reality of who she is and all of that, right? So her family plays a big part in Laura being like this, but for some reason she's afraid of contact with the world outside. So like these are symbolized through like the typewriter, right? She's supposed to be going to business school and learning how to type and learning to better herself, but for some reason she went and she had to do like a typing test, and that made her so nervous that I think she threw up all over the class, and then she ran away because she didn't ever want to go back because it was so overwhelming and scary for her. So this is a very paralyzed kind of a character, right? This is someone with some strange neurosis that can't function outside in the real world. Now contrast this character with the other young women of pieces that we've looked at. Compare her with Eveline, compare her with Adichie's heroine or narrator. What differences can you see? What sort of similarities or differences are there in the portrayals, right? So she's scared of business school. She's scared of Jim. When she hears now Jim is the only man she supposedly ever liked in her life, and when she hears that he's coming to visit, she goes into this flurry of terror and she gets headaches and she's like, oh my god, I can't come to the table, and she's like completely dramatic. So Laura is like, to me, she's very interesting. She prefers to remain in this world of glass, and it gets you thinking, is it really because the world of glass is safe and she prefers this illusion to living that way? Or is it because for some reason in her family she's not even allowed to step out of that world of glass? Is she sort of kept in that like sort of mental cage by her brother and mother as well? Think about those a little bit. I'm not saying yes or no to anything. I'm giving you things to think about, right? So as a color, you find that blue is often associated with Laura. Okay, so in general, when you're going through the play and studying it, I want you to look at Tennessee Williams's directions, production notes, stage directions. Try to keep an eye out for which colors are associated with which characters. What sort of colors does Tom usually wear? What sort of colors does Mrs. Wingfield is she portrayed in? You will, like in general, you'll find that blue is often the color to do with Laura. Okay, so blue as an emotion. Now remember, this is a memory play. We're looking at this through the lens of emotion, memory tinged with emotion. And in general, you know that blue is like a symbol, like a symbolic representation of melancholy, of sadness, of despair, or like something to do with sadness, right? So Laura is often seen generally dressed in blue. Her dresses or her attire will often be blue. She's called Blue Roses by Jim. Remember? like the nickname he has come up with her because he didn't understand or hear fluorosis, he started calling her blue roses, right? And then also whenever Laura is on stage and when the focus is on her, check what color the lighting is. Is the lighting usually bright green or bright red, or is it like more blue? Like, I think blue lighting is what's used to depict Laura most of the time. So that's also an interesting aspect to look at. So Williams's plays in general have this overarching theme, like whether it's the Glass Menagerie or like Streetcar Named Desire, like all of these plays generally have this idea of a negative impact that stereotypical conventional society can have on the sensitive and nonconformist individual. So a sensitive individual who doesn't really fit in with the sort of heteronormative stereotypical norms of the world, the impact that the negative impact that this has on them, right? So think about who are the sensitive nonconformist individuals in the play. I'm going to come back to this and ask you guys, who are the sensitive nonconformist individuals in the play, and think about how does the play portray this. So in light of Laura's character, especially in contrast, like Laura is often a character foil, right? She is just a static character that doesn't really grow. She is placed there to contrast with a lot of other characters. So look at how Laura's character and another character shows you the contrast between reality versus illusion and dreams. Who would you say are the characters that embody reality or portray reality versus who are the characters who portray illusions and dreams? Then connection versus escape. The need for connection versus the need for escape. Okay? Remember, since we spoke about Tom as well, let me like bring it back to you. Remember with Adichie, we were talking about the main character who got a chance to escape her life, and wow, how does she move when she gets that chance? Does she remain stuck? Does she try to make the best of what she can do, and does she keep moving? Contrast her with Eveline. What does she do when she gets the chance to move? When this idea of escape, when escape comes through, when the chance for it happens, what is the main character stuck? Are they able to move? And then this idea, then look at that also with Laura versus Tom. Who can escape? Who has the chances to escape? Who cannot escape? Who wants to escape? Who doesn't want to escape? All of these things are like little elements of this, right? Then this idea of sacrifice and duty towards your family, towards other people, towards the greater good, versus survival. What do you need to do to survive? And personal freedom. Survival and personal freedom. So this play is something like we discussed before as well that has a lot of autobiographical elements. Okay, you've probably heard this and you've probably known some of the backstory to this. Tennessee Williams himself, like he's drawing this directly from his life experiences. He is supposed to have worked like 3 years in a shoe house, a shoe manufacturing warehouse kind of a job, which he absolutely hated, and he wanted to be a writer and he was stuck and he couldn't leave that job. And he has also had a sister who has had a different sort of disability. I think she had a lobotomy and something happened to her brain and she was institutionalized. So he has had a mother like this who was a Southern belle from the antebellum age and who was very hung up on the past and this. So all of these have autobiographical elements. So consider those as well when you're reading the play, right? Okay, let's move on to Amanda Wingfield. Okay, one of theater's most disliked and most generally very negatively portrayed characters. Okay, so I want you guys to think about this fact of Amanda Wingfield. Like, how do we see her? again brings us back to those questions of whose lens are we seeing her through. The culprit is right here. Whose lens are we seeing the mother portrayed through? So is she a nagging histrionic mother? Is she this very hysterical, histrionic, like dramatic mother who is controlling and manipulative and very trying to stifle her children? Or is she a woman who is trying to do the best with what she can in the circumstances that were given to her? I'm not saying yes or no. I'm telling you to think about this. Now, if you've read Pride and Prejudice, think about Mrs. Bennet. Again, a despicable character, at least for me. Like, I cannot stand her. But again, she is very similar. Like, they are both women who want the best for the children, and the best that they can think of, especially for a daughter, is just to get her married. Like, somehow find somebody to marry her, because that's the best circumstance available for them during that era and like in that historical context, right? So think about her. Is she a narcissistic, smothering and unbearable woman, or is she a trapped woman who's also just like stuck in her circumstances and can't find a different way out, right? Because really think about what are her options in life. Somebody like Amanda Wingfield, this protagonist's mother, narrator's mother, what are her options in life? She's been deserted by her husband. Okay, she's financially dependent on her son for everything, for the house. And at one point he says, who do you think pays like the rent for this place that we're living? Who buys all this? So the son is the figure who is like financially securing both these two women's futures, right? Then what are her daughter's options in life? Right? Go back to the play and read it. If there is, I can't remember if there is any indication by Williams whether Amanda ever worked. Like, why can't she work? Like, did she ever have a job at any point in her life? And that's something for you to think about and to actually go and look, right? But what are her daughter's options in life? So she has a crippled daughter, like a disabled daughter, and she tries to send her to business school, or she tries in what she thinks is right, but it doesn't really match the needs of these two children. They are two not typical children. They are not these like rat race running and high achieving kind of kids. So there is a disjoint between the mother's needs and the mother's worldview, and the children, what they need and the way. And these are not actually children, these are adult children too. So this is a mother in relationship with her adult children. All of these three characters are kind of stunted in their own ways, right? They're stuck and stunted. So she was a Southern belle, who was like one of the beauties of her time, and she once had 17 gentlemen callers, so something that she can't get rid of, like can't let go of, and she constantly keeps repeating, oh, there was this one time where I had 17 gentlemen. So she is stuck in this like past, in this narrative and this dream version of her life, right? Now she is a single mother, deserted by her husband, who just went off and left all of them. And somehow she's managed to raise the children, right? So I'm assuming that she must have had a job at some point and done what she could. She managed to bring them up. And now she's waiting for this gentleman caller to come and save her daughter, which in itself is such an illusion, because her gentleman caller, now think about it, like Mitcharata 17 gentleman callers line dalat, look at what her one gentleman caller that she married ended up in her life. Did she have a perfect life? Like, did she achieve anything? Like, that man left her with two children. But she is living under this illusion that if only Laura can get a gentleman caller, her life is going to be sorted. Okay, so kind of like a pathetic character in herself, who is like living in this sort of hung up in the past kind of a dream world. So what I find interesting about this is that she occupies Okay, so Methuli has noted that Amanda did work on some kind of magazine promotion to find the money needed to do the renovations for the gentleman caller to arrive. Yeah, I do remember. I don't know if she was raising money or funds, but yeah, she was doing some book promotion and calling around people and stuff, right? Yeah, so that's an interesting point for you guys to go and look into. Is she really just like a desperate, like a stuck woman who's relying on her son and like stuck in this dream world that's not ever going to take place, or is she because to if you really look into it, to me she seems like she's a pretty practical woman. She does what needs to be done too. So like Mithuli was noting, she goes and tries to raise money for this gentleman call, and then she sets up the place and she does what is needed. She tries to tell Tom what to was. So she's not like a helpless annoying character who doesn't do anything for herself, right? So which is why I find that she occupies a middle realm. Okay, so out of these three characters, fourth being Jim, but he's like a intrusion into the private world, but in the private world of this domestic life, she's the one who occupies a middle realm. She lives in a world that fluctuates between illusion and reality. So she can be practical and realistic, and she can go and do what is necessary, and she thinks ahead, and she's constantly worrying about what do I do for my son, what does my son have to do to become like better in life, what does my daughter have to do. So she does have that realistic side, but she also tends to often retreat into this pull of the past. Oh, my past was so romantic. So she has this like romanticizing and tendency to sort of float away into a dream world. So again, a form of delusion. No, so these are characters, all of them, who have delusions that they cling on to in order to get them through life. Laura clings to her glass animals and tries to pretend that the world is like this safe little place of glass. Amanda clings to her past and to this idea that the past was a form of escape. Tom clings to the idea that the future is a form of escape, that if only he can get out of this freaking house, he can have a life for himself. He can finally be happy. Okay, so all of them are kind of clinging to delusions of their own. So let me see if I want you to watch this little clip, which will give you like a good insight into Amanda's character.
Hild has long been vilified as one of theater's greatest monsters. The Glass Menagerie's matriarch, she's the overbearing single mother of the self-indulgent Tom and the emotionally crippled Laura. She is a one-time Southern belle, pushing her children to live the life that passed her by.
How old are you, Laura? Mother, you know my age. I was under the impression that you were an adult, but evidently I was very much mistaken.
I have immense respect for her. That she drives them all crazy is too bad, but she's got a job to do, and she's just not particularly diplomatic in how she does it.
For decades, actors playing Tennessee Williams' iconic Amanda have ferociously torn through his 1944 play. Their narcissistic Amanda blankets the fractured family's small St. Louis apartment with a smothering malignancy, but not actress Cherry Jones.
Amanda was abandoned with those children in St. Louis in the 19-teens. Not a businesswoman. Not able to go back to the South for whatever reason, because she doesn't return to the South, so it leads me to believe there wasn't much to return to. And she has to figure out a way to clothe, feed, house these children. And she gets them through the 20s, and then the Depression hits. So she is extraordinary.
Jones' take on Amanda is one of myriad nuances in a freshly conceived production of The Glass Menagerie at the American Repertory Theater. It also stars Zachary Quinto as Tom, the elder son quick to abdicate his role as family provider for that of a poet, not unlike Tennessee Williams himself.
House. Who pays the rent on the house? Who makes a slave of himself?
Can't talk to me like that.
No, I mustn't say anything. I've just got to keep quiet, let you do all the talking.
Let me tell you something.
I don't want to hear anymore.
He feels deeply, and he feels terribly that his family's in a situation, but he knows that his life can't be about fixing it for them. It has to be about realizing it for himself.
A memory play, Glass Menagerie, is also Tom's recollections of a brief, turbulent time when his mother wants to line up gentleman callers for his sister Laura before she slips down the drain of her emotional despair.
Okay, so well, you could hear that, right? You could see and hear it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, so that is just to give you a bit of idea about the nuances of these characters, right? Like, so it'll get you thinking a little bit more about this, especially these female characters, the nuances of what situations they're in, what options do they have, and also very importantly, like I said, whose gaze are we seeing them through, whose lens, whose memory, whose narration are we seeing them through. Okay, so that's something to think about, and that's really important. And think about your impressions about Amanda Wingfield as in contrast to and in comparison with her daughter. Like, this mother and daughter figures, what sort of a realm do they occupy? Is Laura purely in the realm of illusions and dreams? Is Amanda somewhere in between, trying to straddle both? And also think about like Tom in terms of like what I was speaking about before about Laura's, that compare and contrast between reality versus illusion, between connection versus escape. Look at a character like Tom's as opposed to a character like Eveline, okay? Remember when Eveline had the chance to leave and she was, her fiance or like her partner was waiting for her to get on that ship and leave with him, and she chose to go back to her family? Now here we have Tom, who has the option, who seizes the option, and he leaves. He doesn't look back. He gets out, he escapes, because he's like, if I live in this environment, I am going to die. I can't survive. So my survival needs to come first. So there's no right and wrong to these choices. No, there's everything so complex and so intricate. This is what human existence is all about, right? So this is a play that really gets you thinking about those. Okay. Which brings us to the idea of symbolism. Now, something again very, very important in Tennessee Williams's play, and especially this style of psychological realism, of plastic theater, and all these expressionist devices that he uses, symbolism. Almost everything that comes up in this play, everything is intricately symbolic. Okay, remember in Harold Pinter, we were talking about, could there be symbolism in like the crockery, the black and white crockery that he was using, or could there be symbolism in the dumbwaiter? Like, that's in comparison to that, like Tennessee Williams's plays are everywhere there's symbolism, everywhere you look, right? So the most obvious of them will obviously be the Glass Menagerie. This stands for, this is a very powerful symbol. You need to it's pretty obvious, but I'm not going to spoon feed you and tell you what the symbol is for. Really think about what we discussed about Laura. Think about what we discussed about the family. Think about what these animal figurines symbolize. What does a glass menagerie symbolize? An entire collection of little glass animals that are so fragile and that can really be broken easily, but it's a separate world, an entire world that you can immerse yourself in and stay. What's the symbolism of the unicorn? Okay, remember Laura says that was her favorite animal. And why does she say it's her favorite? Because he's different. Because the unicorn is different and he has a horn and not like the other horses. So all of the other horses are similar and they look alike. And then there's a unicorn. So who is Laura identifying the unicorn with? Right? What is the unicorn a symbol for? Then this idea of blue roses. Okay, blue roses, that's a nickname that Jim gives to Laura. But what are blue roses actually? Like, blue roses are not a natural phenomenon in the world. The color blue it's rare enough in nature as it comes. You don't easily get blue flowers, and blue roses definitely are not a natural variety. They're something that can be artificially created by, like, companies and all of that do that for commercial purposes to inject them and sort of like bud them and mix them and get that color, but definitely not a natural phenomenon. And for that reason, they are often considered very unique and mythical and sort of unreal. So what symbolism does this have in relation to Laura as a person who is known as Blue Roses? And it's very pathetic but also very tragic and sad. Laura is very attached to that name also, right? Blue Roses. And remember, Kinuri was asking, is there a chance that Jim was the one who saw her better than the rest of her family? Like, Jim is literally the only one who sees her as anything apart from like a fragile, disabled person, right? And that's why she's so attached to this idea of blue roses. Like, he said this to her like so long ago when they were in high school, when they were just kids, but she's been holding on to that memory ever since. Oh, he called me Blue Roses, mother. Like, that was his nickname for me and all of that, right? So, symbols. Then this idea of the gentleman caller. Now, very interestingly, like, remember when Williams himself, or like Tom as the narrator, sets the stage for the play, he tells you that since this is a memory play, there's going to be a lot of symbolism. It's not realistic. There will be symbolic elements. And then he goes on to describe, but since I have a poet's weakness for symbols, I am using this character also as a symbol. So he says he's using this gentleman caller as a symbol. He himself tells you that he is the long delayed but always expected something that we live for. Now, I find this very interesting in terms of last time we were talking about existentialism and the modern 20th century's sort of themes in modern drama, right? Remember I was talking about this waiting for Godot? Waiting for Godot or Godot, Godot or Godot. I'm like it's pronounced in both ways. This idea of two men who are perpetually waiting for this person who is supposed to come to meet them, but he never comes, right? And that sort of theme, that sort of existential theme, that idea of who are we waiting for, what are we waiting for, when is it going to come? Here, Tennessee Williams tells us that he uses the gentleman caller as the symbol. So as a symbol for the long delayed but always expected something that we live for. So we're living for something. We're hoping that it will come, but we're not sure if it will, but we're constantly waiting for it, right? So again, something interesting to think about. Then the fire escape. Fire escape is very clear symbols. Like, none of these symbols are complex. That's the thing about this memory play. You don't have to really like rack your mind and dig deep into finding out what they are. It's pretty obvious and pretty, like, the word itself is there, the fire escape. Who can access the fire escape? Who do we always see on the fire escape? It's almost always Tom, right? We are shown Tom, and when Jim comes, when the gentleman caller comes, the two boys are on the fire escape and they're smoking and they're like having a chat and all of that. Mother comes up to the fire escape, but she doesn't like it. I think there are times where she complains about it and she's like, I hate this thing and I wish we had a porch and stuff. But she comes there to get access to Tom because that's the only place she can probably catch him, because he always goes there to escape the house and sort of be smoking there, right? And then there is a point where Laura uses the fire escape to go out just shopping and stuff. And can you remember, I think there's a point where she trips and falls and her like I don't know, sprains her leg or like basically falls down at some point. So all of these are inserted by the playwright for reasons, right? So they are showing you who can escape from this fire escape, who constantly uses it to leave the house in the middle of the night and go to the movies and come back at 2 a.m. Can Laura do that? Can Amanda do that? Can the other two women inside the space do that? So things to think about. And then the candelabrum. Like that what is the importance of that setting where the lights black out and there's no light and there's only a candle? Apart from the theatrics of light and shadow and the sort of like dreamlike lighting and mystical nature of the play, what is that candle supposed to signify? Why are Jim and Laura suddenly placed in a lighting and a setting where they are sitting with that candelabrum on the floor, and those candelabrum is basically the candle holder which has multiple candles in it, right? So a lot of symbolic elements are in the play, which makes it very interesting for you guys to go and analyze it. Okay. Okay, I have a few questions for you guys. There's 4 questions, and I'm going to, since there's 4 of you, I'm going to get each of you to think about these and then share what your thoughts are. Okay, so let's separate these. So I'm gonna get Dulana to think about how or why would you classify the Glass Menagerie as a modern play. Okay, why would you classify the Glass Menagerie as a modern play? What elements or devices can you point out in order to prove this? Okay, Dulana, you can take take like 5 minutes. I'm going to give you guys 5 or 10 minutes to just brainstorm and think for yourself. So Dulana will be thinking about that question. Second question, let's have Kinuri do this. So what are the existential themes? Even though this play is not absurdist in style, what are the existential themes that are still present, and can you see any parallels with Dumbwaiter? Okay, try to analyze it through the 3 characters. See what can you see existential ideas or similarities there. Let's have Methuli do this. Whose eyes do we see the women characters through? It's a pretty clear idea, but how does this gaze impact our reading of the characters, right? How does this lens that we are looking at impact our reading of these female characters? And Sethuki can do this. Do any of the characters have actual agency in the play? Which characters have agency, which ones don't? Compare with Evelyn, Adichi's narrator, Gus, or Ben, like basically the bigger characters we've seen so far, okay?
Miss, may I start?
Sorry, I was talking. Yeah, Dulan, if you're ready, you can start.
The first thing I found is the use of modernist symbols like the glass menageries, the unicorn, and the fire escape. And then the illusion kind of thing, like throughout the play, the escape from reality is there. No?
Yes.
Also, the alienization theory, like blue roses thing.
Just keep explaining. Just
yes, miss.
Okay.
Laura is being like a non-realistic character, like.
Okay, so you've pointed out some of the elements and devices, and you've taken them together, Dulana. But when you're forming the answer, so like if you're going to be writing this as an answer, think about how are they modernist. Okay, how are they modern elements? So all these things that you said, yes, alienation. Think about, is alienation only Laura's alienation, or is it alienation of the individual in society? Because we are trying to tie this to the idea of modern drama. What was modern drama talking about? So maybe I don't know if you probably didn't get to watch the previous session that we did, but if possible, just go back. You can get the link from these guys. I've put that video up online, because in the beginning we spoke about what modern drama was, like what are the common kind of ideas or themes that they have, right? So some things that they are preoccupied with this idea of like like you were saying, like alienation of the individual, and then these themes of sort of frustrations of the middle class, and what sort of the socio-historical context that they're in, like that time period is pointed out by certain. They depict theater in a different way. So it's different to sort of like Shakespearean theater, or it's different to, we were talking last time, you might have missed this in the previous class, we were talking about Victorian melodrama. So in Victorian melodrama, everything is black and white. There is a hero who is like the good embodiment of good and the heroic person. Then there's a villain who is like obviously the bad person, and there's the fight between good and bad, and then there is the tragic heroine who is like, oh, like save me everybody. So it's very cut and dry, sort of like there's no nuances to it, right? So when it comes to a modern drama, how does that differ? What sort of devices? So when we're talking about elements and devices, you can talk about like the use of, for example, breaking the fourth wall, using a narrator who is also a character in the play, who is somebody who that's a modern device. That's not a device that used to be there in Shakespearean times or like in Victorian times. This is new modern theater. And then this idea of lighting and sound and using the physical stage as a way to mirror a character's psyche, that's a very modern idea. Right? These are not things that used to be there in medieval plays or like previous theater styles. So though like all of your answers were right, but you need to push those symbols. Like you were talking about blue roses, like what does blue, then you were talking about the symbols. So what, pull them out, pull out those symbols, pull out those things that you spoke about, and try to find a justification for why, like for the question why, how do those elements make this a modern drama, right? Could you, like for example, those same elements that you spoke about, couldn't it have been there in an Elizabethan play? If there was blue roses in an Elizabethan play, how does it differ when it's a modern play? Do you get what I'm trying to get at? Like I want you to push more to think about modern drama devices and theatrics. Okay, so try to rewatch a recap of that if possible. If not, do a bit of research on your own. What is modern drama exactly? What is modern theater, and what are the elements of it? Okay, and I think we'll discuss it a bit more in the next slide as well. Okay, Kino, can we have you tell us about the existential themes that you were able to pick up, which is again a theme of 20th century modern drama, right? Existentialism.
I think Tom's relationship with his job at the warehouse is similar to the hitman's. Like his character is very compatible with that of Cus's because of his restlessness and dissatisfaction with life. But unlike in the dumbwaiter, he actually attempts to break out of that monotone and finds a purpose in life. And in Laura's character, I think her obedience to her family members is similar to that of Ben's character. And the blind eye that she turns to her weakness is it's what keeps her stagnated. So I think that's related to it. And Amanda's role as a authoritative figure in the family is like that of Wilson's in The Dumbwaiter, although not to that extent, but the way she kind of forces the members to shape their future without actually giving them options is kind of similar, I think.
Okay, you picked up on some interesting and you picked up on some good points. I would add a couple of things to that, like all of those things were valid. I would also add in terms of, remember we spoke about what is existentialism, a lack of meaning, a lack of sense in life and what you're doing, and characterized by repetition, monotony, and all these things, right? So very true about Tom's job. Monotonous to an ideal, and if you watch the setting of the Glass Menagerie, you will see it's all about Tom going to work, coming home drained, trying to write, argument with his mother, goes to work the following day, then to escape that goes to a play, then comes back drained again, and then again something with the mother. So you can see those cycles, right? So even though this is like a memory play and it's a very different style, you can see those 20th century themes, right? Like life as a endless cycle. Every day you go to work, come home, your mother and sister at home, you're depressed, and then you go out, and then so like that is happening. So that's one thing, that monotony and that. Then think about, when you're talking about Laura, think about the existentialist like kind of take on this fact of like, look at the repetition with which she lives her life every single day. Like you can see her portrayed in the play as constantly cleaning and rubbing those figures, right? It's obsessive. There's like an obsessive compulsive element to it, but it's also very pathetic and sad, right? This girl's entire life is spent just rubbing and cleaning her glass figurines, setting them this way, then sets them again this way, like that idea of repetition and monotony again, right? And then think of Amanda, like apart from like her being like a controlling figure and like trying to be the authority in all of this too, also her own life, right? That feeling of stuckness, that feeling of what meaning has her life had at the end of the day, and what's her way out. So all these themes, even so, like I was trying to say, even though this is not absurdist in style, so absurdist plays are very in your face, they are telling you directly what they want to say, but what in this, inside this psychological realm, you can find these parallels, right? Okay, so good. So Methuli, let me see if Satoki is, okay, she's not still back. So Methuli, you can answer your question, and if you feel so inspired, you can also attempt to just roughly touch upon whether this idea of agency, since we're talking about the women characters, tell us a bit more about agency in the play as well. Okay, Mithili.
So when it comes to whose eyes do we see the women characters through? Because this is a memory play that's going around the memory of Tom. Obviously, I think we are basically like directly seeing both the characters through Tom's eyes, but Amanda's character, as read as an audience, like mostly we feel like she's very meddling and very controlling of the children. I think that's because she's Tom's mother, and that's the way Tom sees her, and that like the Tom's feelings about his mother is what is getting projected to the audience. I think that's why we feel like we cannot stand Amanda. And on the other hand, when it comes to Laura, I think a lot of her helplessness and the way she is portrayed as a very helpless character, very shy and very introverted, is also through Tom's eyes, but that is also Tom's view of her is also influenced by Amanda's thoughts about Laura and maybe the society as well, because of her crippledness and what everybody has to say about it. In my point of view, even though Amanda looks like she's very, like, as we said before, we can't stand her, I feel like Amanda is like a woman who's stuck in her own mind, and she can't get out of the past because her present is not that pleasant. So she chooses to stay there and be happy with it. Like, obviously, even though she had 17 gentlemen callers and all of that, the final man she chose doesn't even like choose to stay with her. And I think she's just a woman stuck in her own mind, and she just goes on with life, and she just kind of chooses to ignore everything else, and projects her life. Maybe like most of the times mothers feel like when we don't get something, we have to give it to our children, and she's trying to do that, but it's going to her, it's affecting her children in a very negative way.
Okay, good points and interesting. One thing I want to pull out from there, or like the points you made were all valid. So for the others as well, it's all of the things that you guys pulled out in these questions are things I want you to think more about and ponder and really like while you're, I don't know, having your breakfast or like taking a shower or something, things just to think about, like in your head, right? But something interesting that I want to pull out from your last answer, Mithuli, you were saying that Amanda is someone who chooses to stay stuck in her past because her reality isn't pleasant. So her current reality isn't pleasant or nice or a nice place to be. So she finds herself and she chooses to be stuck in the past. I want you guys to apply that same statement to all three of these characters and see whether they are any different. Look at all three of them. If now Tom, we are trying to see this play through Tom's eyes, through his narration, and he posits himself as very different from like the rest of his family, and like they are very individual, three separate people. But if you really look at the root of them, are all three characters not the same? They are all three, their present reality is not pleasant and it's not a place where they want to be. So aren't they all trying to stay stuck on other things in order to evade this? And what do you call these type of characters? These are what you call escapists, right? These are all three escapist characters. Tom doesn't like his reality. He doesn't like his job. He doesn't like being stuck with his family and having to cater in this domestic environment. He is looking for an escape. How is he trying to? He is trying to go to the movies. He is trying to leave the house as much as possible. He is trying to think of a future where he leaves these people behind and becomes a writer, and he can, like, he's stuck in that place. Amanda's life situation isn't good and it's not pleasant. She is stuck in a past. Laura's life situation isn't great. She is sad and like miserable and stuck at home with this mother and brother who are constantly fighting. She chooses to escape into a world of glass figurines. And so at the root of this, all three of these Wingfields are escapists. They just don't realize it. And if they spoke more to each other, if they actually communicated and talked to each other as people, they would have actually found out that they are not as different as they think. All three of them are trying to escape some common core misery, and it's the sad tragedy of the play that they are unable to communicate this to each other, and they just keep going around in circles and fighting over other things like practicalities of life, right? So something to think about. And then also think about this question of agency. Agency is very important. Female characters, the agency they have. Male characters, the agency they have. If you really think about it, I would say like the person with the most agency in that play would be the gentleman caller. It's Jim, because he's the one who seems to have the agency to make decisions in life and do things that he wants. Like all three of these people are stuck in different ways, no? Okay. So moving on. Yeah, which brings us to like themes and devices. I'm going to do a very quick look of this. So I'm going to start with this because that was what Dulana was answering. So we're looking at elements of modernism in the sort of techniques that Williams uses. So this idea of plastic theatre instead of realistic theatre forms and conventions, right? Fluidity of consciousness. It's a very new and unique modern technique where you show the inner psyche of a human being and you show the narrator's inner consciousness and that fluid movement of thought. Definitely a modern device. They didn't used to have this in Elizabethan drama or like Greek theatre, or they didn't have that, okay? Then unconventional techniques and freedom of conventions, the ways they manipulate the stage, the ways they break the fourth wall and suddenly directly start talking to people, right? Then emphasis on the divided self. So there is an emphasis that the self itself is split in two. There is your inner self and there is the mask that you project to the world, which is often characterized by Tom, like Tom's character, right? Then these narrative approaches, like all of things for you to think about how this play becomes a modernist play, right? Then in terms of themes, remember we spoke about this. The overarching theme for his plays is the negative impact that conventional society has upon sensitive, nonconformist individuals. Now the reason I put that up there as well is because if you think about it, obviously the moment you think sensitive, you think of Laura, right? The moment you think nonconformist, you would think a bit more of Tom, because Laura comes across as a bit conformist because she listens to her mother and listens to society and like tries to stay boxed in, whereas Tom is like, I don't like my current job, I want to be a writer and I'm gonna try this. But this brother and sister taken together, both of them fall into this category. So the tragedy of the play is that Amanda's children are both non-conformists. They are different in their own ways. Like they are not traditional kind of like children or like traditional adults with who crave careers and who crave money and riches and ambition. Like they are both, Laura and Tom are also more alike than they actually think. And maybe that's why there is a bond between Tom and Laura, right? Even though he has to desert her in the end, like I think those two have like a sibling affection and a commonality in between. So think about both of these two as sensitive and non-conformist individuals. So we'll look a little bit more at that in the next slide. So also think about this idea of expressionism. Expressionism is something that began as an art movement. So expressionism is an art style that came up in art and paintings and like the different styles that artists were using, and this was adopted into theater. So it was a genre, like a style that said that art should be an expression of inner feelings, of emotions, but using a distorted or exaggerated outside reality instead of a very realist approach, exaggerations, right? So little bit more to think about. And then this idea of glass, obviously, like very, very important. Like it's there in the title, it's there in the main symbols, it's there in the characters. This idea that glass breaks so easily, no matter how careful you are. I think this is a quote by Laura when the unicorn's head breaks, right? So this idea of glass, it's showing us fragility. Obviously, it's a symbol for fragility, but a fragility of what exactly? Okay, is it a fragility of memory? Is it how fragile memory can be? Is it the fragility of family? How fragile family is, how you think that you're doing what's best for another person in your family, but actually you're breaking them, and how fragile those bonds are, right? Is it about the fragility of human relationships? How human relationships are formed and how quickly they can be broken? Is it about happiness? Is it about life? Is it even about the fragility of parenting? Like you think you're trying to protect your children and you're trying to bring them up in a good way, but whatever you do, you could be making mistakes, right? You could actually be inadvertently harming the kids. And Amanda thinks that she's doing the best for Laura, but is Laura actually getting the best out of this sort of relationship she has? So all things to think about. Okay, and then final thoughts. So this is a lens, this is a way of looking at the play. So something that for you guys to think about, to push your boundaries of how you see the play. What happens when Tom's character is queered on stage? Now what is it to queer? Have you heard this word queering? Queering is to portray a character as not like a straight or like not a heterosexual version of events. What if Tom is a queer character? What if he is gay or homosexual or bisexual? The reason I'm asking this question is because this play is supposed to be a autobiographical play, so it's a autobiographical play based on Tennessee Williams, and Tennessee Williams himself was known for being like a queer, homosexual, a bisexual, and he was that is his history. So what happens when we portray Tom on stage as a queer character, right? How will this make a difference to your interpretation of the play? How does, if Tom was a gay man, if Tom was a queer gay man stuck in this situation, how would him being stuck in a family environment where he can't escape and he has to look after his mother and sister, how does that change your portrayal of it? Then what happens if Laura's character, now in the play Laura is said to just have a limp, she's supposed to have a limp and her mother doesn't want her to be called crippled. What if she's even more visibly disabled? So these questions are purely about performance. They're about thinking about the play on stage. What happens when it's like put out there on a stage with these elements included? So it's the idea of reimagining this play through both queer and disabled lenses. So these are lenses are ways of looking at a play. So the reason I want you to see them is because I put up these two productions here. Now here in this production of the Glass Menagerie, they have very clearly queered Tom. So he's no longer like a heteronormative, like a straight man who's like goes to the job and smokes and does a look at this interpretation and think if it makes any difference to your reading of the play, if it's like this.
Yes, that's true. Driven out. What is the matter with you, you big idiot? Look, I haven't got one single thing in my life that I can call my own. Everything's just... Yesterday you got about books. You had the nerve.
Yes, I took that horrible book back to the library written by that hideous Mr. Lawrence. I cannot control the output of the diseased minds of the people that cater to them. To be brought into my household. No.
House? Oh, house. Well, who pays rent on it? Who makes a slave of himself? No, I mustn't say things. I don't want to hear it anymore.
Okay, so that's enough for you to get an idea. I just wanted you to show, I wanted to show you how these representations can change, right? Instead of like this heteronormative, like man of the house figure who like fends for his mother and father, how mother and sister, how would that visual, like how would that reading of the play change if Tom was like a queer character? And who's to say that he wasn't? Because if Tennessee Williams was queer, if he was a gay man, why would Tom be a straight man? Like it could very well be a queer man that he's portrayed, right? And let's see if the other one plays. I want to show you how a like an actual disabled actress could be cast as in the role of Laura. So let's see this. Okay, so you were able to see and hear that, right? Both the two videos? Yeah, okay. So just to throw it out there for you guys to think that Tom's and Laura's character portrayals might also not be what we have in our heads. They can be portrayed through a queer lens. They can be portrayed through a disabled lens. Think of what that adds to the play if it was like that. Okay, so those are just some parting thoughts to think about. And finally, this brings us to this idea of an autobiographical reading of of Tennessee Williams's play. So just to finish off, let's have you guys read this for a little bit. Like, Kino, can you start us off with reading the first paragraph?
Okay. A poet and playwright, Williams, originally born Thomas Lanier Williams, has said that he wrote out of an intense personal need. Williams believed that his characters could be representations of reality and truth, stretching the ways in which society openly discusses sexuality and violence. He confronts his audience with the unsettling truth of the home as anything but a comfortable retreat, an idea derived from his personal experiences. His work references figures from his childhood, constructing a sort of self-portrait through his work.
Okay, thanks. So I just wanted you to get an idea of a play doesn't necessarily have to, we don't have to look look at it as like a exact reading of his life, but obviously his life very much influenced this, right? So that's what we just need to remember. So we need to remember that William's father has been a heavy drinker and he was apparently very unfaithful in his marriage. So you will see these themes coming up, like his mother's a southern belle, like this woman who was hung up on her southern past. Like these similar themes will come up even if you watch Streetcar Named Desire. So all of his plays, like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, like all of these plays have these similar narrative lines going through them, right? So early 20th century gender roles, an example of his parents' difficult marriage and his stigmatized homosexuality would create in his plays this sort of like deconstruction. What is a deconstruction? It's sort of like a breaking down of female and masculine behavior to show you that gender is not exactly what it seems. Like this idea of gender roles being something that society has imposed on us. So it positions the audience between societal expectations and personal desire. And he's also known for his portrayal of women being pretty complex, like sometimes positioning them in a place of submission, but also power. So just something I pulled out from this article, if you want to go and read it. So things for you guys to think about. So that brings us to the overview of Tennessee Williams. I think the Glass Menagerie, we covered it all so far, at least all that I can think of. Do you guys have any questions at all that you want clarified or want to ask?
It's clear, everything is.
Okay. Then let's proceed to Methuli's unrelated question. What is it you wanted to ask?
How do we train ourselves to see more than what's on paper?
That is a very interesting question. How do you train yourselves? I wish I had a clear-cut answer to that. I would say one way would be like if you end up going to university and once you do go to uni, they will have a training for you where they will teach you these different lenses to look at. They will like once you go to uni, you will be taught these post-colonial lenses, like a gender lens, a queer lens, like I was talking about, disability. Like you look at the play through different angles to find an inner entryway into it. But that is completely separate because I believe that that's a very academical and like a sort of like a technical training. I think that the training should come personally from yourself, and that's what worked for me. Like all throughout, like my history with literature was purely that I read texts and I look at things, and I think I told you guys this even when we were doing poetry. Like my approach to it was always look for interconnections, because I try to look at the text as not something that is set in stone or something like purely there, something more fluid, that it's something that exists in relation to other texts. Because at the end of the day, like I always tell you, writers influence each other, social events influence each other, things that happen in the world, what happens in one country influences like the world order. So all of these are interrelated, and I would say training yourself, I would rather stay away from the academic training because that's something I personally don't believe a lot in. I think it's useful, but I don't think it's something that you should take so serious and let it overrule your life, right? I think try to look for things that interest you. That's where the beginning of like finding interesting things in literature comes from. Whenever you're reading something, try to find something that's close to your heart or that intrigues you or that makes you curious. If you see something that strikes you, like whether it's the style of a piece of play or whether it's a moment between characters, like some sort of comment that they make that gets you thinking about something, pick something up and start digging deeper into it. And the more you think along that line, the more you will train your own brain to think for yourself and not to think in terms of what other people are teaching you. And that's what I've been trying to tell you guys and to help you guys towards like these entire sessions we've been doing, try to pick things in literature that get you excited and start pushing along those lines instead of thinking of, oh, my teacher taught me this, or my exam question is looking for this, or if I go to university, my lecturers told me to look at something in such an angle. No, like you look at what excites you and what interests you. And I think it's a lifelong training, Mithuli. I don't think it's something that you can be taught through school or university. Definitely not through university is what my general feeling. But it's something that you develop in yourself purely through your passion and inquisitiveness, inquiry. Always inquire about things and try to be curious. Curiosity is the biggest thing. Like curiosity apparently killed the cat, but before it killed the cat, I'm sure it made him a very intellectual and exciting cat. So if you spoke with the cat, you would have had a lot to talk about. But jokes aside, just try to, that's I don't think I can provide any clear answer for that, how to train yourself. But I can tell you, push yourself to wonder, to curiosity, and to a sense of awe about what you're studying or like what you're reading. And that will always, always serve you well. I hope that was a helpful answer.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Okay. If you guys have no more questions for today, we can stop then. And I know you're all heading into your exams, most of you at least. So good luck for your final term tests, and we'll meet on the other side. I'll be a bit busy this week, but I'll drop a message when I can do another session next week then. Okay. Thanks everyone, and have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Right. Okay. Bye-bye then, and see you guys soon.